The rain fell like shards of glass against the neon-soaked streets, streaking the city with fleeting, fractured colors. La Rosa, the downtown nightclub that pulsed with life and danger alike, was louder than usual tonight. The bass rattled the marble floor, the chandeliers sparkled as if mocking the darkness that clung to some corners of the room, and yet, amidst the laughter and clinking of glasses, Selena felt invisible. Or maybe she just wanted to be. Balancing a tray of crystal glasses, her hands steady but her heart racing, Selena moved through the crowded floor with practiced grace. Her heels clicked against the polished wood in a rhythm she had perfected over years of service. Every smile was measured, every laugh timed, every word spoken carefully so no one could see the bruises she hid beneath her crisp, white blouse. The faint purples and yellows were like a secret language only she could read, a diary of pain written in shadows on her skin. Her eyes caught a movement at the far table, a figure so commanding that even the bustling chaos seemed to part for him. Vincenzo Romano, the man whispered about in every corner of the city, the Mafia king whose very name inspired fear and reverence in equal measure. He didn't need to raise a hand for people to obey. His presence alone bent the world around him, and now, somehow, his gaze was fixed on her. Selena froze mid-step, her breath caught somewhere between fear and recognition. She had seen him before, of course. He frequented La Rosa, often in the shadows, often alone, but she had never felt him look at her like this. It wasn't anger. It wasn't suspicion. It was piercing, penetrating, a look that seemed to strip away her carefully constructed barriers, exposing not just her bruises, but her very soul. Selena, his voice cut through the music, soft yet laced with an edge that made the hairs on her arms stand. You're late. A ripple passed through the room. The other waitstaff instinctively shifted, creating a silent perimeter around them. Selena's throat tightened. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes, hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the tray. I'm sorry, sir. The streets, her words faltered, drowned by the pounding bass and her own rapid heartbeat. He didn't flinch. Instead, his gaze dropped to the collar of her blouse. The bruises bloomed in the dim light, hidden masterpieces of suffering that she had hoped no one would ever notice. Selena's mind screamed at her to look away, to escape, to melt into the crowd like she always did. But something about the way Vincenzo's eyes lingered made her pause. They weren't hungry. They weren't cruel. They were observing, understanding. And for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. You don't have to hide anymore, he said softly. The words were almost drowned by the music, yet they struck her like a hammer. Not from me. Her chest tightened. Hope mingled with fear in a confusing cocktail that left her speechless. How could a man like him, a figure whose very existence was synonymous with power, crime, and danger, notice her pain and not exploit it? Before she could even respond, he rose from his seat. The motion was subtle, but in that nightclub, it carried the weight of authority. The staff instinctively stepped back, sensing the shift. He moved toward the exit, every step deliberate, every movement a reminder that he owned this city, this moment, and perhaps, unknowingly, her heart. Selena hesitated, but the urgency in his eyes silenced doubt. She followed him, the tray of untouched glasses clinking faintly as she moved. The noise of the club faded behind them, replaced by the staccato rhythm of rain against the alley's asphalt and the echo of her own hurried footsteps. The neon lights reflected in puddles, creating distorted, ghostly doubles of the two figures as they moved through the wet night. She didn't know if she was walking toward salvation or destruction. Maybe both. But something inside her told her that turning back was no longer an option. They stopped under a flickering streetlight. Vincenzo turned to her, the rain slicking his dark hair to his forehead, droplets running down the sharp lines of his face. He reached out, not threateningly, but with the faintest gesture of protection, as if acknowledging her pain without needing an explanation. "You shouldn't have to carry this alone," he murmured. His words, though simple, cut through layers of shame and fear she had worn like armor for years. Selena's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Memories surged up, nights she had cried in silence, hiding from the world, hiding from judgment, hiding from herself. She had learned to survive in shadows, to smile while broken, to serve while bleeding. And now, here was a man who could destroy entire families with a single decision, offering her something she had long forgotten: choice. Her throat constricted as tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them back. She wasn't weak. She wasn't vulnerable. She was careful. She was surviving. And yet, maybe it was time for more. "Why me?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Why notice me?" Vincenzo's gaze softened. Not entirely, but enough to make her heart skip a beat. "Because even the strongest walls have cracks. And you have many," he said. His words were strange, intimate, unsettling. He knew pain. He understood it. And somehow, she believed he meant it. The alley felt smaller now, as if the world had shrunk to just the two of them and the rain. Selena shivered, not entirely from the cold, and Vincenzo removed his jacket, draping it over her shoulders. The leather was rough against her blouse, but the gesture was protective, grounding. "You're going to let me help," he said simply. "No demands, no threats, just certainty." Selena's mind raced. Help from a mafia boss? From a man who could ruin her life with a flick of his finger? And yet, when she looked into his eyes, she saw a promise that scared her more than any threat ever could. A promise of change, of power wielded differently, and of a world where she didn't have to hide. A flash of doubt crossed her mind. Maybe she was walking into another trap. Maybe this was a mistake she would pay for with more than bruises. But the alternative, returning to the life of silence, the life of pretending, the life of hiding in plain sight, felt unbearable. She nodded once, barely perceptible. And in that silent, rain-drenched moment, something shifted. For the first time in a long time, Selena felt seen. Truly seen. The city roared around them, indifferent to the fragile moment unfolding in its alleys. But for Selena, the night had changed. The rain, once cold and unfeeling, now carried a strange warmth. And the man who could terrify an entire city had shown her something more terrifying and more exhilarating than fear, possibility. The night was far from over, and neither was the storm inside her. Before we dive deeper into the story, take a moment to hit that like button if you love suspenseful, emotional stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next thrilling chapter. We also want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Whether it's your city, your country, or even just your favorite spot to watch these stories, we love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's get back to the story and see just how far courage can take someone when danger is closing in. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, mist curling around the streetlights like smoke. Selena shivered under Vincenzo's jacket, the leather cool against her soaked blouse. Her mind raced, replaying the moment in the alley, the way his gaze had found the bruises she thought were invisible. She hated herself for feeling relieved. She hated herself even more for the flutter of hope that dared to rise inside her. Vincenzo walked in silence, the sound of his polished shoes striking puddles echoing like a metronome in the empty street. Selena followed, careful to keep her pace, careful not to stumble, careful not to show how small and fragile she felt. But no matter how hard she tried to appear composed, the memories clung stubbornly to her mind. Nights of screaming silence, fists against walls, threats whispered in her ear by someone who had promised love but delivered nothing but pain. Her apartment, when she finally reached it, was tiny and cold, furnished just enough to survive. She had stripped it of anything that might hint at a life she could have had. No pictures on the walls, no letters, no traces of herself beyond the bare essentials. Yet even in this bare existence, she had learned to hide, to move quietly, to make herself invisible. That was survival. That was the only thing she had ever been good at. Vincenzo didn't comment on the apartment, didn't ask questions. He simply followed her inside, his presence filling the space without a word. The contrast between him and her bare, silent world was stark. He was power, influence, danger, all of it wrapped up in a single man who had just moments ago told her she didn't need to hide anymore. "I should go," she said softly, more out of habit than desire. She didn't want him to see the mess, the fear, the vulnerability that lived in the corners of her apartment. But before she could take a step toward the door, he stopped her. "You don't have to be alone," he said simply. His voice carried a weight that made her stomach twist. "Not tonight." Selena shook her head, forcing a smile that she hoped looked natural. "I'm used to it," she whispered. "I've been alone for a long time." "You shouldn't have to be," he said. And there it was again. Hope, dangerous and fragile, threading its way through her chest. The next morning, the city woke with the sound of sirens and the smell of wet asphalt. Selena returned to La Rosa, the bruises carefully hidden beneath a fresh blouse, her movements as measured and precise as ever. But now, something was different. She noticed how the waitstaff moved around her, the whispers she pretended not to hear, and most of all, the eyes of the men and women who frequented the club. She had always felt like nothing invisible. Now she felt seen. Her best friend and fellow waitress, Maya, approached with a tray of coffee. "Rough night?" she asked, her tone casual but eye-sharp. Maya had always been perceptive, the kind of friend who noticed even the smallest cracks in her armor. Selena forced a laugh. "You could say that." Maya glanced at her with a mix of concern and frustration. "Selena, you don't have to hide it. Not from me." Selena looked away, biting her lip. She wasn't ready to tell anyone, not yet. Not about the bruises. Not about the nights she had tried to disappear in silence. "I'm fine," she said softly. "Really?" But Maya didn't look convinced. She gave a knowing nod and moved on, leaving Selena to her thoughts. Back at Vincenzo's table that night, the Mafia boss sat alone, swirling a glass of dark liquor. He wasn't a man who asked questions lightly, nor did he trust easily, but something about Selena had struck a chord he didn't expect. He had seen the bruises, yes, but it wasn't just the bruises, it was the resilience beneath them. The careful way she moved, the way she hid pain, yet kept her dignity intact. It was rare, too rare. He thought about the city, his empire of fear and respect. He had always controlled everything, everyone, but this woman was different. She didn't beg. She didn't flatter. She didn't even notice him, at least not yet. Selena's world wasn't just La Rosa and her tiny apartment. She had a job she tolerated, a city that didn't care, and a past that clawed at her every time she let her guard down. Her father had left when she was 12, her mother had done the best she could but was always exhausted, and she had learned early that vulnerability was a luxury she could not afford. The bruises weren't just from the man who had once called himself her boyfriend. They were reminders of every time she had been silenced. Every time, she had been told her pain was nothing. And now, here was Vincenzo, a man feared by the entire city, offering her the impossible, a choice. Safety. Protection. Perhaps even justice. She didn't know if she could trust him, and yet she wanted to. That night, after her shift, she found herself walking the wet streets again, her mind a storm of fear and curiosity. Vincenzo had asked nothing of her, had given no promises, yet she couldn't stop thinking about him. She wondered what it would feel like to have someone truly see her, someone powerful enough to protect her, but willing to respect her at the same time. And then, as if the city itself wanted to test her resolve, she spotted him leaning against the side of the club, his jacket once again soaked by rain, eyes scanning the streets as if expecting her. "Selena," he called softly as she approached. "You're thinking too much." I can't help it," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've been hiding for so long. I don't even know how to stop." He smiled then, faint but real, a dangerous warmth that made her pulse spike. "Then let me show you." For the first time in years, Selena felt a flicker of something dangerous, something thrilling. Hope. But even as she felt it, a small, cautious voice whispered inside her mind. Trusting him could be a mistake. A very dangerous mistake. And yet, she couldn't look away. The city's neon glow shimmered on the wet pavement as Selena walked home, clutching her bag tightly. Her mind replayed every word Vincenzo had spoken, every glance he had given her. Something inside whispered that her life was on the verge of changing, whether she wanted it or not. Her apartment door clicked shut behind her, shutting out the noise of the city, the blaring horns, the shouting from the streets. Inside it was quiet, too quiet almost. Selena's heart skipped as she noticed the small envelope tucked under her door. She hadn't seen it before. No name, no mark. Just an ordinary envelope in a world that had never been ordinary for her. Hands trembling, she picked it up, her fingers brushing the rain-soaked paper. Something about it made her stomach twist. Curiosity battled caution, and curiosity won. Inside, there was a single photograph and a note. The photograph was grainy, taken from a distance, an image of her apartment's hallway, her door slightly ajar. And in the note, written in jagged handwriting, were the words, "You can't hide forever. He's watching." Her blood ran cold. The first instinct was to throw it away, to pretend it had never existed. But she couldn't. The words echoed something she had feared but never named. The bruises, the hidden scars, the nights she had spent trembling in silence. They were no longer hers alone to carry. Someone knew. Someone was paying attention. Selena sank onto her couch, the envelope clutched to her chest. She felt trapped, exposed, and terrified. For the first time in years, she realized she wasn't just hiding from the world anymore. Someone was hunting her pain. Someone was turning it into a threat. The next day, at La Rosa, everything felt heavier. Every glance from a patron, every whispered comment, seemed amplified, loaded with danger. She couldn't shake the memory of the photograph, the message, the feeling of being watched. And then, out of nowhere, Vincenzo appeared. He didn't come to her table, didn't demand an explanation. He simply leaned casually against the bar, dark eyes scanning her like a predator and protector rolled into one. "You look tense," he said softly when she finally met his gaze. "Something's wrong." Selena's hands trembled as she handed him his drink. I found something," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the club's music. "An envelope. A photo and a note." Vincenzo's eyes darkened. The ease, the charm, the playful danger she had glimpsed before vanished, replaced by sharp, calculating focus. He glanced at the envelope, then back at her. "You're in danger," he said simply, and for the first time, Selena felt the weight of the city pressing against her like a vice. "And it's bigger than anything you've faced." Selena's mind reeled. Bigger? She had survived years of abuse, hidden scars, the suffocating threat of men who promised love and delivered terror. But this was different. This wasn't something she could ignore or endure alone. "Why me?" she asked, panic threading her voice. "Why now? Why this?" Vincenzo's expression softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through the armor of the Mafia king. "Because they know about you. And because I can't let them hurt you." Selena blinked. The offer of protection was intoxicating, terrifying. She knew the kind of man Vincenzo was, the kind of man who could destroy lives with a word, who controlled the city from shadows and whispers. And yet, he was offering her a lifeline. "You don't have to make a choice now," he said, placing a hand gently over hers. The contact was grounding, yet sent an electric thrill through her. "But you need to be ready to act. Because once this starts, there's no going back." Her chest tightened. "Once this starts, no going back." Those words settled deep in her bones. She understood the stakes now, clearer than ever. She could ignore it, hide, pretend it wasn't happening, but the moment she did, the danger would find her anyway. And this time, she might not survive. That night, she couldn't sleep. The photograph replayed in her mind, the half-open door, the threatening message, the invisible eyes watching her every move. She checked the locks obsessively, double-checked the windows, and even peered through the blinds at the rain-slick streets outside. Fear coiled in her stomach, like a living thing. And then she remembered Vincenzo's words. "You don't have to hide anymore." The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent years hiding, from abusers, from pain, from herself. And now, even as the threat pressed closer, the first flicker of trust, of hope, urged her to step forward rather than retreat. By morning, Selena had made her decision. She wouldn't ignore this. She wouldn't run blindly. And most of all, she wouldn't face it alone. Not if Vincenzo was willing to stand with her. As she walked back to La Rosa, her resolve hardened. Danger lurked in every shadow, and her life was about to be irrevocably changed. But for the first time in a long time, she felt the thrill of agency, the pulse of determination mingled with fear. Selena's apartment felt smaller than ever that morning, the air heavy with unspoken danger. She couldn't focus on the mundane routines she had perfected, folding her laundry, making coffee, scrolling absent-mindedly through emails. Her mind was a storm of fear and curiosity, swirling around the photograph and the note she had found the night before. "You can't hide forever. He's watching." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop running. Meet me at the pier. Alone. 8 p.m. Her hands shook as she read it. Every instinct screamed to ignore it, to throw the phone into the trash, to retreat into the safety of her hiding. But another, deeper part of her, the part that had survived so many nights of fear, recognized a chance. A chance to take control. To understand. To fight back. Selena knew she couldn't do this alone. And yet, calling Vincenzo felt almost dangerous. He was a man of power, a man who didn't tolerate weakness, and yet he had offered her protection, his eyes soft and intense whenever she thought of him. After pacing the small apartment for what felt like hours, she dialed his number. The line connected immediately, and his deep voice filled her ear. "Selena," he said, almost as if he had been waiting. "I've been expecting this." I got a message," she admitted, her voice trembling despite her attempts at calm. I think someone knows." Vincenzo's silence stretched, sharp and controlled. Someone is always watching, he said finally. But this is personal. Someone wants to intimidate you. And I intend to find out who. Selena swallowed hard. His certainty, his control, it was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. What should I do? She asked. Don't go alone, he said simply. Meet me outside your building at 7. We leave together. No risks. By evening, the rain had returned, a light drizzle washing the city in silver. Selena waited, nerves coiled like steel springs, every sound amplified in her ears. Footsteps, distant sirens, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, they all seemed like signals of impending danger. Then he appeared. Vincenzo. Towering, imposing, yet somehow protective. The shadows of the streetlight danced across his face, highlighting the intensity of his gaze. He didn't speak, simply offered his arm. Selena hesitated, then took it. The contact was electric, grounding her even as her pulse raced. The walk to the pier was silent, but the tension between them was a language in itself. Every step echoed the unspoken question, can I trust him? Can I trust myself? When they arrived, the pier stretched out like a silver ribbon into the misty water. Empty except for a single figure standing under a flickering lamp. Selena's breath caught. The person was tall, their face obscured by the hood of a dark jacket. Vincenzo's grip on her arm tightened subtly, a silent warning. Stay close, he murmured. The figure stepped forward, hands raised slightly, revealing nothing but the intent to be seen. Selena's stomach twisted. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was this a friend or a foe? Someone playing a dangerous game? You received my messages, the stranger said, voice calm but firm. I'm not here to hurt you, but you need to know your past isn't as hidden as you think. Selena's pulse thudded violently. What do you mean? The stranger pulled back the hood, revealing a face she knew all too well. Marco, her ex-boyfriend, the one who had left her with bruises, with silence, with fear. Her breath caught. The memories hit like a freight train, screaming, fists, threats whispered in the dark, nights of trembling alone. Marco smirked, the kind of smirk that had once made her afraid to breathe. You shouldn't have left, he said softly, almost mockingly. But you did. And now, everyone's watching. Vincenzo's hand dropped from her arm, only for a moment. Before he stepped forward, his presence suddenly magnetic, overwhelming. His voice, low and dangerous, cut through the cold night. Stay away from her. Marco's smirk faltered. Or what? He asked, a hint of fear creeping in. You know what I am, Vincenzo said, every word weighted with authority. And you know what I can do. Don't test me. Selena's chest tightened. The fear she had lived with for years collided with a new, raw emotion. Safety. A man capable of dominating a city, a man feared by everyone, was offering her protection. And he wasn't just offering it. He was claiming it. Claiming her. Marco hesitated, then slowly backed away into the shadows. Selena exhaled, trembling, as Vincenzo turned to her. Are you okay? His tone was soft now, almost tender, the dangerous edge softened by concern. I think so, she whispered. Her hands shook. I didn't know he was still, her words trailed off. Vincenzo reached for her hand, but instead of holding it, he gently brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. You're safe now, he said. The certainty in his voice wrapped around her like armor, stronger than any lock or barricade she had ever set. In the days that followed, Selena couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. Marco's message had been a warning, but from whom? And why now? Her world, once predictable and hidden, had exploded into a network of threats, unknown players, and dangerous attention. Vincenzo became her anchor. Not just a protector, but a guide, showing her how to navigate the shadowed streets of the city, how to recognize danger before it struck. He had contacts, resources, and a reach that Selena had only ever read about in hushed tones. And yet, with him, she felt something more, a thrill, a connection, a dangerous attraction she hadn't anticipated. He never pushed, never forced her into anything. He simply made her feel that she could step out of the shadows without fear. And each time he looked at her, that glance lingered longer than necessary, carrying unspoken questions, unspoken promises. Selena realized that surviving wasn't enough anymore. She wanted to fight back, to understand who was targeting her, to reclaim control. And for the first time in years, she felt powerful, not because she was unhurt, but because she had someone by her side who made her feel capable of confronting the storm. Selena couldn't sleep that night. The city's neon lights bled through the blinds, painting her apartment in streaks of electric blue and crimson, shadows twisting across her bare walls like specters. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, made her jump. But it wasn't the city that kept her awake. It was the memory of Marco's appearance, his smirk, and the undeniable truth that her past had been watching her all along. And then there was Vincenzo. She had tried to focus on him, not just as a protector, but as something more, something dangerous. Every moment he spent near her, the electric tension in his presence, the soft but commanding authority in his voice, it all gnawed at her, stirring emotions she had long buried beneath years of pain. She hated that she needed him. She hated that she craved his protection. But she couldn't deny it. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting her from her spiraling thoughts. A message from an unknown number. Meet me tonight. 11 p.m. Pier 9. Alone. Answers await. Selena's stomach turned. Her first instinct screamed to call Vincenzo immediately, to lean on the man who had proven he could protect her. But a part of her, the part that had survived abuse, manipulation, and betrayal, urged caution. She knew the risks. Going alone could be catastrophic. And yet, curiosity gnawed at her, insistent and unrelenting. She couldn't ignore it. By 11 p.m., the pier was shrouded in fog, the moon a sliver above the mist. Selena's heels clicked against the damp wood, echoing in the silent night. The water lapped at the edges of the dock, reflecting the hazy moonlight like shards of broken glass. Her hands shook as she clutched her bag, every nerve on edge. A figure emerged from the fog. Familiar, yet distant. "Marco, you came," he said, voice smooth, practiced. "I didn't think you would." Selena's heart raced. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" Marco smirked, a shadow of cruelty dancing across his features. "You think it's about you?" He leaned closer, the fog curling around him like a cloak. "You're just the beginning." Her blood ran cold. What do you mean?" He pulled out a folder from his coat pocket and tossed it to her feet. Selena bent down, hands trembling, and opened it. Her heart stopped. Photographs, documents, videos, all evidence of her life, her mistakes, her secrets. And then she saw it, pictures of her at work with Vincenzo. Private, intimate moments captured without her knowledge. She's been watched," she whispered, voice breaking. "Why? Who did this?" Marco leaned in, his smirk fading, replaced by something calculating. "You've been part of a bigger game all along. That man," he gestured toward the shadows, and Selena's stomach dropped. "Vincenzo isn't just protecting you because he cares. He has his own reasons. You're not a coincidence, Selena. You never were." The word struck her like a bullet. Her chest tightened, breath catching. What do you mean?" Marco's voice softened, almost mocking, almost tender. He's using you, watching you, testing you. Every step you take, every tear you hide, it's part of his plan. Selena staggered back, her knees threatening to give way. No, that can't be true. He saved me. He protected me. He is not what you think, Marco interrupted sharply. Open your eyes. Look at the bigger picture. Her mind spun. Every protective glance, every subtle touch, every whispered warning from Vincenzo, was it genuine, or had it all been orchestrated? The idea was unbearable. She had finally begun to trust, to hope, to feel seen, and now it was crumbling. You don't understand, Selena whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I trusted him. Exactly, Marco said, voice low and sharp. He needed you to trust him. And you did. You fell for it, just like everyone else in his world. Selena's hands shook as she realized the depth of her vulnerability. All the walls she had built, all the armor she had worn, Vincenzo had seen through it. But was it protection? Or manipulation? She didn't know anymore. And then Marco dropped the final bombshell. If you think you're safe now, think again. You're deeper in his game than you realize. And he will use every ounce of control he has to keep you exactly where he wants you. The fog swirled around them, the water lapping at the pier like the beating of her own heart, rapid, erratic, and impossible to control. Selena turned, ready to run, but the dock creaked beneath her. And from the shadows, a figure stepped forward, tall, commanding, and undeniably dangerous. Vincenzo. Step away, he said, voice smooth but deadly. She's not yours to threaten. Marco laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Oh, she's mine in more ways than you think. Selena's chest felt like it was collapsing. Two men, two forces pulling her in opposite directions. One had protected her, one had terrorized her, and now the lines were blurred. She didn't know what was real anymore. Vincenzo's eyes, however, held hers. The intensity, the raw emotion, the power, it was all there. And for a fleeting moment, she believed in him again. But doubt lingered, gnawing at her. Could she trust this man? Could she believe he wasn't part of the conspiracy that had stalked her for months? Her voice trembled. Vincenzo, tell me the truth. Please. I need the truth. Vincenzo's expression softened, but his jaw tightened. The truth is, I've been protecting you, every step of the way. But you need to understand something. This world is dangerous. And I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe, even if it means making choices you won't understand. Selena's breath caught. His words were both reassurance and warning. Protection came at a cost, she realized. A cost she hadn't been prepared to pay, but one she might have to accept if she wanted to survive. Marco's smirk faded as Vincenzo stepped closer, the sheer presence of the Mafia boss exuding authority, dominance, and danger. And Selena, caught between fear, attraction, and the chaos of her life, felt a strange sense of clarity. For all the uncertainty, for all the betrayal, one thing was undeniable. Vincenzo had the power to protect her and maybe, just maybe, to help her reclaim her life. But trust was the real battlefield now. The rain had returned in sheets, slamming against the windows of Selena's apartment like a furious drumbeat. Inside, she sat on the edge of her bed, the envelope still clutched in her hands, the photographs spread out like shards of her life. Marco's words echoed in her mind, gnawing at her. He's using you. You're not a coincidence, Selena. You never were. Her chest burned. She had trusted Vincenzo, leaned on him, let herself feel for the first time in years. And now, every memory, the soft way he had brushed her hair aside, The protective grip of his hand, the intensity of his gaze, was tainted with doubt. Was he truly protecting her? Or was he just another force in the dangerous game she had somehow been thrust into? The apartment felt like a cage. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, forming phantom figures that whispered accusations and threats. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You made your choice. Now, there's no turning back." Panic surged, raw and unrelenting. Selena's hands shook as she dropped the phone onto the bed. Every instinct screamed that danger was imminent. The city outside no longer felt like her home. It felt like a predator circling her. She pressed her face to her knees, trembling. All the courage she had summoned over the past week, the decision to confront Marco, the choice to rely on Vincenzo, felt like a cruel joke. She had survived abuse, hiding, running, surviving. But now, the weight of mistrust, fear, and betrayal threatened to crush her completely. Hours passed, the rain never letting up. The city was a blur outside her window, a wall of water and neon. Selena's thoughts spiraled. Every shadow, every whisper of wind, every flicker of light seemed like a threat. And then it hit her. She was alone. Vincenzo was nowhere to be found. He hadn't answered her calls, her texts. He was gone. The thought was unbearable. She felt abandoned in the city that had never cared, abandoned in a world that had only ever been cruel, abandoned even by the man she had begun to trust, maybe even care for. Tears streamed down her face, unbidden, unrestrained. She hadn't cried like this in years, not since nights spent under bruised arms and whispered threats. The weight of isolation pressed on her chest. She thought of Marco's smirk, of the way he had smiled when he said Vincenzo had motives beyond protection. She thought of the threats, the messages, the fear that had stalked her for months. She thought of herself and realized, with crushing clarity, that she was powerless. Selena pulled the blankets around her, curling into a ball on the bed, shaking with sobs. The apartment, once her sanctuary, now felt like a coffin. Every photograph, every document, every threat was a reminder of how fragile she was. Suddenly, a loud bang at the door jolted her upright. Heart pounding, she scrambled to the window, peering through the blinds. The hallway was empty. Her apartment was locked, the deadbolt secure. But the bang had rattled her completely. The paranoia she had tried to ignore all week surged into full-blown terror. Then, another sound, a whisper of movement from the kitchen. Selena froze, every muscle coiled, every instinct screaming that she was not alone. She reached for the small knife she kept in her nightstand, the one she had always laughed off as a precaution but now clutched like a lifeline. "Selena," a voice hissed, chillingly familiar. Her blood ran cold.
"Marco."
He stepped into the apartment, casual, almost playful, but with an edge that made her stomach twist in fear. "Miss me?" he said softly, stepping closer. Selena backed against the wall, trembling. What do you want?" He smiled, a cruel, knowing smile. "You know exactly what I want. I want answers. And maybe, I want to see how far you'll go for him." Vincenzo. The thought of him burned inside her. Where is he? She had trusted him, relied on him, and now she was entirely alone with Marco. Panic and fear were pure and raw in her veins. Marco lunged, fast and unexpected. Selena dodged instinctively, the knife slicing through the air in a desperate defense. The struggle was brief, but violent. In the chaos, Marco's smirk faltered, replaced with frustration. "You're slippery, just like he said." Selena's mind raced. She had to survive. She had to. She couldn't trust anyone completely, but she knew one thing. Running or hiding wasn't an option tonight. Survival required action. Hours blurred. The struggle, the fear, the terror of being cornered. It all melded into a haze. Selena's apartment was a battlefield of overturned furniture, broken glass, and adrenaline-fueled instinct. Every sound outside felt like another threat. Every shadow felt like Marco returning. And yet, amid the chaos, she realized something. She had survived. Again. Against Marco. Against fear. Against every instinct telling her to give up, she had held her ground. And though she was trembling, soaked in sweat and tears, a small, fierce spark of clarity ignited inside her. She was not powerless. The moment passed, and the city settled into an eerie quiet. Selena sank to the floor, trembling, and realized how close she had come to losing everything. Not just her life, but her sense of self, her hope, her trust. And yet, she also realized that fear alone would never protect her. She would need strength. She would need courage. She would need clarity. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The city was washed clean, silent, and bright under the first light of morning. Selena sat on the edge of her bed, exhausted, bruised, and trembling, but alive. She had survived the night that had seemed impossible to endure. She had faced the darkness alone, and though she felt the weight of fear, doubt, and betrayal pressing on her chest, she also felt a glimmer of something else: resilience. She remembered Vincenzo's words, "I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe, even if it means making choices you won't understand." For the first time, Selena began to see what he meant. Protection wasn't just about shields and safety. It was about preparation, strategy, and trust. But trust, that was a battlefield of its own. And she knew that before she could face Marco, or the deeper threats lurking in the shadows, she would need to confront her own fears, her own pain, and her own strength. The morning light streamed into Selena's apartment, soft and almost fragile against the storm of emotions still raging inside her. She had survived the night that had seemed impossible. The night Marco had infiltrated her life, her space, and her sense of safety. But the victory felt hollow. Bruises throbbed across her body, and exhaustion clung to her bones like wet blankets. Yet, amid the physical and emotional ache, a small ember of something new burned within her: clarity. Selena had always been cautious, always hiding, always retreating. But she realized now that running hadn't saved her. It had only delayed the inevitable. Fear had defined her life for too long. And if she continued to let it control her, she would always be a prisoner of her past, of abusers, of threats lurking in the shadows. Her gaze drifted to the scattered photographs, the documents, and the threatening messages. Each one was a reminder not just of danger, but of opportunity. Opportunity to understand. Opportunity to fight back. Opportunity to reclaim her life. Selena knew what she had to do. She needed information. She couldn't rely solely on instinct, courage, or even Vincenzo's protection. Knowledge was power, and she needed to gather it before the danger found her again. She started with her phone, scanning every message, every unknown number, every trace of digital threat. Something clicked when she cross-referenced Marco's latest note with the photographs. He hadn't come alone. Someone else was orchestrating the threats, monitoring her every move. The realization hit like a punch to the stomach. Marco was a pawn. Someone higher up, someone with more reach than she could imagine, was pulling the strings. Her fear didn't vanish. It sharpened. But alongside it came determination. She could be terrified, she could be cautious, but she could not be paralyzed. By mid-morning, Vincenzo arrived. His presence, commanding yet calm, filled the small apartment, and for a moment, Selena hesitated. Could she fully trust him now? Could she believe that he wasn't part of the manipulations, part of the surveillance that had haunted her life? He knelt slightly in front of her, eyes locking with hers. "Selena, you need to understand something," he said, voice steady. "Everything I've done, from protecting you to monitoring threats, has been for one reason: to make sure you survive. I will never use you. I will never manipulate you. But there are dangers you don't understand yet. And to survive them, you need to be ready both physically and mentally." Selena felt the tension in her chest ease slightly. The sincerity in his eyes, the quiet intensity of his words, cut through the fog of doubt. She had feared manipulation, but perhaps she had misunderstood. Protection wasn't the same as control. And maybe, just maybe, Vincenzo truly wanted to help her reclaim her life. They spent the next few hours planning. Vincenzo explained the networks of surveillance, the rival factions watching her, the city's hidden underworld. Selena listened, absorbing every detail, her mind sharpening with focus. Each piece of information was a puzzle piece, revealing the larger picture. She realized that her vulnerability was not weakness. It was opportunity. Opportunity to strategize, to prepare, to strike back when the time was right. And then came the moment of clarity, the turning point that would define her path forward. As she scanned the latest files Vincenzo had pulled, a name stood out, one she hadn't expected: Elena Martinez, a woman who had once worked for Marco, rumored to have ties to the city's most ruthless underground operatives. Everything suddenly clicked. The orchestrated messages, the photos, the threats. It was Elena pulling the strings behind the scenes, using Marco as a pawn to manipulate and intimidate Selena. The realization hit hard. She had been reacting blindly for months, letting fear dictate her actions. But now, armed with knowledge, she could act strategically. Fear would no longer be her master. It would be her fuel. Vincenzo watched her closely, noticing the shift in her posture, the fire igniting behind her eyes. "You've found her," he said softly, almost as an observation, almost as reassurance. Selena nodded, a fierce determination settling over her. "Yes. And now I know who I'm really up against. I won't let her or anyone else control me." For the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: power. Not brute strength, not fear, not dependency, but real, grounded, hard-earned power. The kind that comes from knowledge, clarity, and courage. Over the next few days, Selena trained herself in ways she had never imagined. Physical training, mental exercises, strategic planning. Vincenzo guided her through each step, but she took ownership of her progress. Every hour, every movement, every decision was a reclamation of her life. She was no longer the terrified woman hiding behind bruises and shadows. She was becoming someone capable of confronting danger, someone who could fight back and survive. And yet, amid the intensity, her connection with Vincenzo deepened. Their interactions carried unspoken tension, subtle touches, lingering glances. She felt it, the pull, the attraction, the unacknowledged emotions, but now it was grounded not in vulnerability, but in shared purpose, mutual respect, and a fierce understanding of stakes. One night, as they reviewed surveillance footage, a moment of unplanned vulnerability passed between them. Selena leaned over the screens, tracing lines of movement with her fingers. Vincenzo's hand brushed hers, accidental, or perhaps deliberate, and her pulse surged. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and for the first time, she let herself feel something without fear. "You're stronger than you realize," he said, voice low, intimate. "And you're going to need that strength very soon." Selena's heart pounded, but not with fear. With clarity, with resolve. "I know," she whispered. And I'm ready. By the end of the week, Selena had transformed. The woman who had trembled at the envelope under her door, who had fought through fear and betrayal, was gone. In her place stood a woman who was alert, focused, and prepared. She knew the threat she faced, she knew the players, and she knew her own strength. The stage was set. Elena Martinez, Marco, and any others who sought to intimidate or harm her were now visible targets in a city that she no longer feared. And Vincenzo, her protector, her ally, and perhaps something more, was standing beside her, not controlling her, not manipulating her, but ready to fight with her, not for her. Selena took a deep breath, looking out over the city from Vincenzo's car. The night was quiet, the streets wet with rain, lights reflecting like liquid fire on asphalt. She felt the calm before the storm, the heartbeat of the city synchronizing with her own. She was no longer a victim. She was no longer hiding, and she was ready to confront whatever came next. Have you ever found clarity in the darkest moment of your life? Comment below. What would give you the courage to face your fears like Selena? The city was silent that night, a heavy, expectant hush that seemed to press against Selena's skin as she and Vincenzo approached the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The rain had returned in a misty drizzle, coating the streets in slick reflections of neon lights, giving the world an otherworldly glow. Every instinct in her body screamed alert. This was the night, the moment when every fear, every decision, every ounce of courage she had gathered would be tested. Vincenzo walked beside her, calm and controlled, but Selena could feel the tension radiating from him like electricity. He didn't need to say it. The knowledge of danger, the anticipation of confrontation, was in the air, almost tangible. "This is it," he murmured, his eyes scanning the perimeter. "Elena Martinez is inside. Marco will be there too. Be ready for anything." Selena's pulse raced. She had rehearsed this moment endlessly in her mind, anticipated the threats, planned her moves, but nothing could truly prepare her for facing them head-on. She tightened her grip on the small, concealed weapon she had learned to use over the past week, a gift from Vincenzo along with the knowledge of how to defend herself. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with purpose. She had come a long way from the terrified waitress, hiding her bruises in silence. She was no longer running. She was here to reclaim her life. They slipped into the warehouse through a side door Vincenzo had scouted days earlier. Shadows stretched across the walls, crates stacked like silent sentinels in the dim light. Selena's eyes adjusted quickly. Every movement, every whisper of sound, every subtle flicker of motion could be a threat. And then she saw them. Marco stood near a pile of crates, smirking like he owned the place. Beside him, Elena Martinez, sharp-featured, icy-eyed, radiating control and menace, surveyed the room as if she had orchestrated the world itself. Their presence sent a shiver down Selena's spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. This was the confrontation she had been building toward. "You came," Elena said, her voice smooth, almost mocking. "I wondered how long it would take before you realized who you were really dealing with." Selena squared her shoulders. "I know exactly who you are now, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." Elena's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Brave words. Let's see if you can back them up." Marco laughed, stepping forward. "She's learned a few tricks," he said, gesturing towards Selena with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "But do you really think you can take us both?" Selena's gaze shifted to Vincenzo, whose presence was calm, commanding, and lethal. He nodded subtly, a silent signal that she was not alone. The power of that reassurance, combined with her own hard-earned strength, steadied her nerves. She drew in a deep breath and stepped forward. The confrontation escalated quickly. Marco lunged first, a wild, desperate strike aimed at intimidating her. But Selena moved with precision, dodging instinctively, using the techniques she had practiced tirelessly. Her strikes were not brute force. They were calculated, strategic, and effective. Marco faltered, surprised by her speed and skill. Elena stepped back, observing, her icy composure unshaken. "Impressive," she said softly. "But skill alone won't save you." Selena's mind raced. She had anticipated this moment, but Elena's calm was unnerving. The woman wasn't just a threat. She was intelligent, calculating, and ruthless. Every movement Elena made was deliberate, testing Selena's reflexes, probing for weaknesses. And then the true test came. Marco recovered and lunged again, this time with more force, more desperation. Selena's instincts kicked in. She dodged, spun, and used his momentum against him, sending him crashing into a stack of crates. The sound of splintering would echoed through the warehouse, and for a moment, she felt a surge of triumph, but Elena's laughter cut through it like ice. "You're fast," Elena said, stepping closer. "But how long can you last?" Selena's eyes narrowed. She realized that physical skill was only part of the equation. Strategy, intelligence, and understanding her opponent's motives were equally critical. She glanced at Vincenzo, who gave a slight nod, another silent signal of trust, of partnership, of shared purpose. Taking a deep breath, Selena focused. Marco was reckless, predictable. Elena was calculating, controlled. By understanding their differences, she could manipulate the battlefield in her favor. She feigned a strike at Marco, drawing his attention, then pivoted, using the distraction to deliver a precise blow to Elena's side. Elena stumbled slightly, caught off guard. Selena pressed the advantage, combining agility, strategy, and raw determination. Marco tried to recover, but Selena's awareness and preparation allowed her to anticipate his movements, keeping him off balance. The battle was intense, adrenaline-fueled, and exhausting. But through it all, Selena realized something profound. She was no longer just fighting for survival. She was fighting for freedom, freedom from fear, from manipulation, from her past. Every strike, every calculated movement, every sharp, decisive action was a reclamation of her life. And then came the turning point. Elena, realizing her control was slipping, lunged with a knife, aiming for Selena. Time seemed to slow. Selena's mind raced, recalling every lesson, every drill, every warning Vincenzo had given. She sidestepped, grabbed Elena's wrist, and twisted with precise leverage, forcing the weapon from her hand. Elena staggered back, shocked, vulnerable. Selena stood over her, chest heaving, eyes blazing. "This ends tonight," she said, her voice steady, commanding. Elena's eyes flickered with something unspoken: respect, fear, maybe even disbelief. Marco groaned from the corner where Selena had incapacitated him, still recovering from her earlier strikes. Vincenzo stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Selena's shoulder. "It's done," he said quietly. "You did this. You took control." Selena's chest tightened with a mix of exhaustion, triumph, and something deeper, a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt in years. She had faced the threats, confronted the mastermind, and survived, not just physically, but emotionally. As Elena and Marco were secured, the tension in the warehouse finally began to dissipate. Selena sank to the ground, trembling but exhilarated. Vincenzo knelt beside her, offering a quiet smile. The city woke slowly, the early morning sun glinting off wet streets as Selena and Vincenzo stepped out of the warehouse. The rain had passed, leaving the world washed clean, sharp, and alive. Selena's body still ached, bruises forming across her arms and shoulders, but there was a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years, a freedom born of survival, victory, and self-realization. For months, she had lived in shadows, hiding both her bruises and her life. Fear had been a constant companion, whispering threats, manipulating decisions, and eroding confidence. But now, standing in the soft morning light, she felt a profound shift. She was no longer hiding. She was no longer a victim. She had reclaimed her body, her mind, and her soul. Vincenzo stayed close, silent but watchful. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a connection forged through shared danger, mutual trust, and raw honesty. Selena glanced at him, noticing the faint tension still lingering in his jaw, the way his eyes scanned the streets even as the threat had passed. Despite the calm, he remained vigilant, a protector by nature and a man whose presence now felt inseparable from her own sense of security. "You know," Selena said softly, breaking the silence, "I don't think I could have done this, not without you." Vincenzo shook his head, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips.
"No.
You did this. I only guided. Every decision, every movement, it was your courage that made the difference. Don't forget that." Selena smiled, a mixture of gratitude and awe. "I've never felt this strong before. Not just physically, but inside. I feel like I can finally breathe." "Good," he said simply, his voice low, resonant, almost intimate. "Because this city doesn't give its secrets easily. But you've learned something more important than any skill or strategy. You've learned to trust yourself." The words sank deep. Selena realized he was right. Her strength wasn't just in survival, it was in clarity, courage, and the decision to face fear head-on. For the first time, she understood what it meant to truly reclaim control over her life. They walked in silence through the quiet streets, the world slowly stirring around them. The warehouse, the threats, Marco and Elena. Everything now felt like a chapter closed, a storm weathered. Yet Selena knew that the lessons she had learned would stay with her forever. The vigilance, the courage, the understanding of power, and the capacity to act decisively when stakes were highest. As they reached the edge of a small park, Vincenzo stopped. The sun had risen fully now, scattering golden light across the wet grass, illuminating the city in a warm, almost magical glow. He turned to her, the intensity in his gaze softened by something deeper, something more human. "Selena," he said, his voice low, deliberate, "what you've done, it's more than survival. It's a testament to who you are. And he paused, as if weighing his next words carefully, "I've never met anyone like you. Strong, brave, unyielding, and yet still human. Still capable of hope." Selena's heart beat faster, the words piercing through the exhaustion and fear she had carried for so long. She felt the tension, the connection, the possibility of something beyond survival, something that could be more than fear and danger. She began, searching for words. "I never thought I could feel this safe, or this alive." Vincenzo stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "Then don't forget it," he whispered. "You are alive, and you are free. And you deserve more than just survival." Her breath caught, the weight of years, months, and weeks lifting slightly from her chest. In that moment, she realized that victory wasn't just about defeating Marco or Elena. It was about reclaiming herself, her autonomy, her power, and her ability to feel, to trust, and to hope. Over the next few days, Selena took steps to rebuild her life. She returned to work, not hiding bruises or fearing judgment, but standing tall, confident, and aware of her own strength. The city felt different now, less threatening, more alive, more hers to navigate. She knew danger could still lurk in the shadows, but she also knew she could face it. Not alone, but with allies, with strategy, and with the courage she had nurtured through fire and fear. Vincenzo remained by her side, their bond deepening through quiet moments, shared strategy, and the mutual recognition of what they had endured. There was tension, yes, but it was tempered by respect and understanding. Each glance, each touch, each conversation carried weight, reminders of the storm they had weathered together. One evening, as the city lights reflected on the wet pavement, Vincenzo and Selena stood on a balcony overlooking the skyline. The air was warm, fragrant with rain, and the city hummed softly below them. "You've changed," Vincenzo said softly, almost in awe. "Stronger, sharper, and yet still human." Selena smiled, the words warm in her chest. "I've survived. I've fought. I've reclaimed myself. And I've realized I'm not alone anymore." He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers with a quiet intensity. "Neither am I," he said. The connection between them was no longer just attraction or tension. It was trust, partnership, and the acknowledgement of everything they had endured together. Selena felt the warmth, the protection, and the possibility of something more, a life beyond fear, beyond survival, and toward love, connection, and fulfillment. Weeks later, Selena received a final confirmation that the threats had been neutralized. Marco was in custody, Elena had vanished into the shadows she once controlled, and the city, for now, seemed at peace. It wasn't perfect. Danger could return, but Selena felt ready. She had learned that life wasn't about avoiding fear. It was about confronting it, mastering it, and refusing to be defined by it. As she stood with Vincenzo on the same balcony where they had celebrated small victories, she looked at the skyline, feeling a profound sense of clarity and closure. The waves of fear, doubt, and betrayal that had once threatened to drown her were now behind her. In front of her stretched possibility, trust, and the fragile, beautiful promise of hope. Selena turned to Vincenzo, eyes reflecting the city lights. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For showing me that I can fight, that I can trust, that I can live." Vincenzo smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No. You did this. I only helped you see it. And together, we'll face whatever comes next." For the first time in years, Selena felt a sense of peace. Not complete, not without caution, but real, earned, and transformative. She had survived abuse, threats, and fear. She had fought for herself, reclaimed her life, and discovered the depths of her courage. The city stretched below them, vast and alive, and Selena knew one thing for certain. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, a warrior, and perhaps even something more, capable of love, connection, and hope in ways she had never imagined. If you were in Selena's place, what would you do to reclaim your life after fear and betrayal? Comment below and share your thoughts, because courage is not just fictional, it's real, and we all have it inside us. Selena's journey reminds us that strength isn't found in running from fear. It's discovered when we face it head-on, when we reclaim our power, and when we refuse to let anyone define our worth. From hiding bruises in silence to standing tall against threats that seemed impossible, she proved that courage, clarity, and trust, both in ourselves and in the right people, can change everything. Her story isn't just about survival, it's about transformation, about finding light in the darkest moments, and about discovering that hope is always worth fighting for. Now it's your turn. Think about Selena's journey. Have you ever faced a moment where fear tried to control your life? How did you find your strength? Share your story in the comments below. We want to hear from you. And if this story gripped you, gave you chills, or left your heart racing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Share this video with friends who love dark romance, mafia suspense, and emotional thrillers, because everyone deserves a story that reminds them of courage, love, and hope. Remember, even in the shadows, there's always a way to reclaim your light.